how big is such in terms of the detail of the application which are sent to National Treasury. Lastly, I think the acting head of procurement is crying foul in the instance which relates to their own capacity, because it has become clear, I think it's clear to them, that it's quite a lot of those applications that flow to them from time to time. And therefore, the lack of capacity would find them wanting in terms of the determination, finalization of such applications in good time. Thank you very much, Chair.
Right, thanks, Babson. I think National Treasury want to react to that.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Yes, we do receive the procurement plan from all the organs of states. Every submission that is put forward is tested against the procurement plan that was submitted. Where we do notice that a deviation is not catered for a procurement process that the organ of states wants to embark on is not on the procurement plan, we do make them aware, and we do ask them to update their procurement plans accordingly. Where on twice a year, we do receive progress on the procurement plans. We have a success rate of just about 80% of submission of progress on the procurement plans. Honorable Chair, honorable members, we are working on making sure that there is compliance to that. But yes, certainly, the procurement plans give us an indication of whether there was a plan for that acquisition. And if there is a deviation required, we do gauge with regards to what was planned from a financial point of view on that acquisition. If I may respond to the number of modifications and deviations, if you look at the numbers that were supported conditionally and those that were supported unconditionally, there is merit in most of the applications that we have. Environmental conditions or supply conditions may change. I have also made reference to the organizations may have a renewal process or a change in strategy, which may necessitate an expansion of the current work, or they may have embarked on phase 1 and want to implement that as phase 2 in their processes. So every situation we are looking at, we do have a closing of loop with AG through our condonation process, where we have irregular expenditure that has incurred by an organ of state through a condonation process. We are in a position to pick up what the trends are. We are in a position to pick up whether there are controls within an organ of state or generally in government with regards to the number of condemnations that we are receiving. I have made reference to the automation of our processes, where we would have categories where we can tag and only be in a position to draw graphs of what we see as trends. At the moment, we have to do everything manually, and it does not work in our favor. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Can we just go to, all right, let me take Mam Tolashe. Let me take Mam Tolashe. Mam T.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. Good evening to yourself, colleagues, and the team. Honorable Chairperson, if the presentation is quite clear, however, I would want to be really educated on what the gentleman is saying, that they are inundated by the questions that are coming from the HODs, whom they want, or they aren't clear whether they do have some understanding insofar as their roles are concerned. And that is brought to them for them to give clarity Can you please repeat that to me? I'm not very clear. Looking at the kind of work that they're expected to do, and also understanding the capabilities of the HODs or they're supposed to have, that how does it happen? If you can just take me through, how does that happen when an HOD of a department won't understand his role or her role to an extent? He would have to ask Treasury, and Treasury would have to look at that with all the schedule of being busy, having to take it back to that HOD to say, no, but you do have powers to resolve this. Is that the case? And if that is the case, I just want to know, ingakanani, can you say, is it a 10%? Is it 40% of departments? Because I really want to see the total picture, Honorable Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's get a response to that.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Thank you, Honorable Member. Let me just qualify that the accounting officers are provided the interpretation or have their SCM functionaries that are supposed to support them with regards to SCM processes in order for them to make informed decision. Honorable Chair, we've got an elephant in the room. Irregular expenditure has to some extent paralyzed some of the SCM functionaries. Hence, the increase in request for National Treasury to confirm their thinking with or their interpretation of the prescripts. We have seen that increase, and we can only pin it to them not wanting to incur irregular expenditure as a result of wrong interpretation. On our side, Honorable Chair, when we do go through the revision of the regulations after the Parliament pass the public procurement bill, we have to make sure that our regulations are clear and that what has to happen within the organs of states is absolutely clear, so that we are not inundated with requests. It's mainly from the SCM functionaries that wants clarity, not necessarily from the accounting officer. It may as well be that, Honorable Chair, the accounting officer wants to make certain that they are not going to lend in irregularity in terms of the procurement process. Unfortunately, in terms of us being inundated, it causes inefficiencies in our operations as National Treasury, specifically when it comes to Instruction 3, 2016-17. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Tolashe, are you fine with that? Can you go to...
He has been quite general. I thought he was going to point straight to where the problem is, because I understand all that he says, but the accounting officer for me has that total responsibility, having to have heard from his SCM and everything else, but the buck stops with him. So if that is the case, I'm worried for Treasury is now overwhelmed with things that is supposed to have been done by the department or the all other entities themselves, without having to come to Treasury. When they think that sometimes they are being taken for granted or for the right to their work, and really pass the ball in a manner that is, for me, exposes the insufficiencies insofar as those departments and those heads, whoever they are, whether the accounting officers or they are seen very much.
Yeah, in fact, I want to build on that, Ma'am Tolashe and colleagues, if I may. Can you go to slide 22? This particular slide. Now, the trends and observations are quite clearly an indication of where the problems are. If you've got an increased departure from the competitive bidding process, clearly that's a red flag. Continuous modification of contracts that keep same service providers, that's a red flag. And then of course, this new trend of disputing audit outcomes, that's another red flag. And the list is endless, really, of why expansions and deviations are continuously, as we have pointed out, being used now as a norm as opposed to being an exception. And so I would really want to gauge from National Treasury. Probably this is a discussion that we need to have. I know that some of these issues in a way are flagged in a way in slide 23. But this slide in its entirety and totality is an indication of the brazen now outlook to want to circumvent due process and land at a level of, easiness to get things through. And I'm really wondering from National Treasury, maybe we need a broader discussion, one that is solution-driven and solution-oriented, working with the AG and the law enforcement agencies, because this is precisely where, in these areas where criminality and maladministration find life. I mean, if you've got non-implementation of consequence management on officials who cause irregular expenditure, it's that issue that we were dealing with yesterday with the South African Post Office. And you see where that has landed the Post Office and the poor governance structures at play. So for me, when I was, prepping for this meeting, I was really just struck by these trends and observations, because clearly things are not getting better to an extent. And I'm quite certain that you're gonna find COVID being used as an excuse for the rise in all of this. So I really hope, National Treasury, can you speak to this slide? And how do we mitigate on this, push back on this, fix this? And maybe moving forward, we would need to get a breakdown. Who are the ones who are increasingly departing from the competitive bidding processes, so that we are specific, that where are all these areas, where are all these trends emerging? I know Honorable Hadebe always uses an expression that we shouldn't crucify the wrong Jesus, so that we are targeted, right? Insofar as this is concerned, is this one. But I really would like you, CPO, to break this slide down. I'm generally and specifically very, very worried if these are now the trends and observations which are at play in procurement. So if you can just speak to this, and I'm building on what Mam Tolash is saying about the responsibilities of the accounting officers. But if you want to get a full diagnosis of this is the problem, it's right here. All these red flags require attention. And I think moving forward, I think our next engagement would have to be a section on this one, all those points. So, but let me just hand it over to National Treasury, and let's speak to this slide, because I think it tells us exactly where the challenges are, so that we can be solution focused about how do we deal with this. Right, National Treasury?
Chair, I'm going to invite Ms. Dakers to speak to this, and I would add from the analysis that her team has made. But I have to indicate, Chair, that all the responses that we get, or the submissions that we get from the accounting officers, for variations as well as for modification. They would either seek for a single supplier or they would seek for a closed tender. And when we do analyze the rationale behind why they are seeking the single source or they are seeking for a closed tender, you would find an element of these things become very predominant in the submissions that we are receiving. I am grateful that at this stage, we've got instruction 3.16.17 that assist us to be in a position to analyze every deviation and every modification that we receive and apply our minds and be in a position to either support or give conditions to it. And those that we do reject are outright not fitting what would be a variation or what would be a modification. And we do deal with them. Chair, poor planning is one of the probably the single contributor. It could be that a specific individual delays starting the process or delays processing documentation that is required for procurement to start to happen. What we see happening when we do have irregularities as a result of these, consequence management doesn't seem to be taken serious by some of the accounting officers when they do submit their condemnations for the irregularities that they have incurred as a result of not having followed the processes. We do take it serious, but we are only in a position to analyze what we receive. In terms of our monitoring processes, we also do pick up some elements of these. Ms. Dekers, if I may invite you to come in at this stage to add more meat to this slide, please.
Thank you, Acting CPO. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, I think this slide really talks to the issues that lead to the departures from normal procurement processes. Planning is probably the main root cause of these departures from normal procurement processes. The reason being, we've seen that institutions fail to adequately conduct market research. Institutions fail to identify appropriate procurement strategies, appropriate procurement methods to procure for goods and services that they require for service delivery. What then that leads to is poor drafting of specifications. Poor drafting of specifications leads to issues like non-responsive tenders, cancellations of tenders, or tenders that do not comply with prescripts. But I think, Chairperson, if poor planning was done, if planning was done properly and adequately, as Treasury, when we received the procurement plans from the institutions, we were supposed to be able to see those procurement where it is impractical to go out on tender for their procurement because the institution or the particular institution would have done adequate market research that indicates to them, for example, that there is only one supplier in the market, or there is not sufficient capacity within the country to get such services and things like that. But because it's not done properly, those things don't come through the procurement planning. Honorable Somyo is quite correct in thinking of mitigating strategies that are supposed to respond to these issues within government. However, with that work not being done in government to plan and adequately research for procurement, it's just not done. So what then happens is that we receive procurement plans that indicates that tender processes are supposed to be implemented within particular quarters and particular months. Then the second part of the challenges come through, where because you did not adequately plan for procurement, you then actually fail to implement your procurement plan. When you fail to implement your procurement plan, it means that then you don't acquire the goods and services that you require for service delivery. Then from then on, you try and find the most easiest way to then procure, because your tender processes have then failed you. And that's where we see deviations start coming through. That's the kind of deviations that when you actually look on the procurement plan, you will find them there. There was supposed to have been a tender. A tender has been cancelled once, it has been cancelled twice, and more than 3 times. And also the lengthy processes or the time periods that the institutions tend to take to finalize the procurement processes also become a significant contributor to this. So as part of these trends that we have observed, honorable members, is that you will see quite a high trend in cancellation of tenders. And institutions therefore come to National Treasury and say, we have to deviate, we have to shorten the bid, we have to go on a closed bid, or we have to appoint the service provider that we have identified through whatever process. And in certain circumstances, you find that National Treasury is in a position where we have to consider issues of service delivery that and consider South Africans that are supposed to be receiving those services from that particular department. But also most concerning to these trends, Chairperson, is the issue around availability of information. I think you have mentioned it as you were building up to your comment, that institutions are not always upfront with information. National Treasury, we most of the times find ourselves having to request for information, request for clarity, sit in meetings and request for additional documents, analyze and request for more. And sometimes those are the reasons why our processes also take a little bit longer to respond to the institutions. I think one of the reasons we really look at these matters critically and we try our best to find a solution-driven outcome is that we want to be helpful, and we want to enhance the state's ability to deliver on the services. However, the compliance becomes critical following proper procurement processes and not circumventing SCM processes also become critical. And Chairperson, then it becomes important that these issues are resolved right from the capacity and the skills of SCM functions within the departments themselves. And therefore, so that when we then deal with issues of deviations and contract modifications, we deal with real issues. We deal with justifiable reasons that are exceptional for the purposes of service delivery, Chairperson. So I think I've elaborated a bit on it, Chairperson. I think what is also important to note in terms of the trends and observations that we have seen is that institutions take a long time and they sit with issues and problems that should have been implemented internally to resolve these issues. And whenever National Treasury then does not support a particular deviation because it is not justifiable, because they failed to plan, they failed to implement procurement process, they failed to manage contracts properly, then it is taken as National Treasury is the one that causes a failure for institutions to deliver on services. Thank you, honorable members.
Thank you, Ms. Decker. Chair, if I may add that one of the responsibilities of National Treasury of all the accounting officers is to ensure that government functions smoothly and that there is no dependence on a single supplier or perpetual utilization of supplier at the detriment of the organization. We do not want an instance where government is unable to deliver on its mandate because a specific supplier has an absolute autonomy in the functioning of the organization in terms of the services and goods that they provide to the organization. We have to start right now to make sure that the market uptake of all the suppliers happens so that other suppliers have an equal opportunity to build up the capability that government requires in order for government to perform its duties and making sure that service delivery happens at the rate that it should happen. We do have accounting officers that inundatedly request a perpetual utilization of a supplier. When we ask specific questions and we want specific technical validation of that perpetual utilization of the supplier, we do not find an answer. Unfortunately, in SCM, in OCPO, we do have researchers that would also go and research the market and get an understanding of the market trends and the market behavior for a specific supplier. And we do confront the accounting officers of organizations where perpetual utilization of a single supplier is encouraged. And National Treasury would then not support that perpetual utilization. Unfortunately, because processes are not started on time in order for them to acquire the goods that they require, we are forced in a situation where, for the sake of service delivery, have to give a conditional approval for that transaction to take place in order that we have a business continuity. But we take note of such instances, and they are instances where there is, like you said, Honorable Chair, elements of fraud and corruption could start in that perpetual utilization of suppliers. And we're trying the best we can as National Treasury with information at our disposal to root out such. Thank you, Chair.
I think that is where I fundamentally have a problem, you see. And this is a point that has been made before. The engineering of a crisis and then citing service delivery as going to be, taking a knock. I don't know. I just feel like CPO, we've been having this discussion with your predecessors, and now we're having it with yourself, and we are not making headway in clamping down on the abuse of expansions and deviations. Something's got to give, and it needs to come from National Treasury. I don't think, what I'm about to say may sound a bit weird, but do not let your conscience be played with to approve under duress. Because that is what fundamentally then creates the perpetuation of the abuse of expansions and deviations on one hand, and on the other hand, the lack of consequence management. Sometimes we have to be brutal to be kind. And conditional approvals are a flexibility which, as far as I'm concerned, are inconsistent themselves with due process. When things have gone wrong and we are now under duress, I don't know, but I really think National Treasury, you need to be firmer, more sterner, and you need to go back to the drawing board. And I really think, colleagues, we need to tie down on this and invoke some sort of intervention in the form of guidelines of the expectations that we have, which must come out of National Treasury in streamlining expansions and deviations. This is totally unacceptable. I honestly, CPO and your team, I can relate to your patriotic moral obligation to look the other way because of the risks which come with some of these things not being approved. But the other one, which is more fundamentally important, is that it doesn't help the country, nor does it help financial management. When loopholes, for lack of a better phrase, take precedence over due process. And I think National Treasury really has to push back on that. Because these trends are not getting fewer, you know? And this is a conversation we have had ad nauseum. And I really think National Treasury, you have to fix this. And because, you know, we have to expose these elements in the government departments and institutions who are abusing this process. And that's why I was saying, I'm really interested to breaking down this into far more detail, who's who in each of these zoos. So the poor contract planning, where is that trend emerging? I mean, the poor procurement planning, where is that trend emerging? So that we zoom into that. I'm not getting a comfort, but colleagues, I think it's something we can apply our minds on, but I think, yeah, it's a problem. I see CPO, you moving to this line of the Q1 top 20 deviations. If you want to speak to that as a means of illustration of the issues I'm raising, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to highlight that we've only indicated top 20 of the deviations that we are receiving. Maybe in our submission pack next time we may give just more detail on the departments that have made an application for deviations and for modifications, so that honorable members may have an appreciation of who are the departments that make this application. We only have highlighted top 20, but we are not indicating what the type of deviation it was. Maybe in the detail, we will probably have to provide that detail in the next submission. We will provide that information. It may not be in the slides, but it may be additional information we may have to submit. Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair.
Okay. No, I hear you. I think we would have to do that and look at this in greater detail. Can I just ask, colleagues, you can come in at any time. National Treasury, have you ever made in your conditional approvals a recommendation for consequence management? Because having realized that, yes, this is a crisis which will set the country down the road to a problem or collapse or a slippery slope, fair enough, you approve because you're preventing a calamity. Okay, that is fine. It's understandable. But does that approval come with a recommendation for consequence management? Because the dereliction of duty insofar as a failure to manage contracts correctly, or procurement and so on, it's like I'm saying, something's got to give. And I know I'm using street lingo here when I say something's got to give, but I'm just trying to be as simplistic as possible on this. So can I just get that so that we can then gauge the response of those who are supposed to do that? Sis Basana, I see your hands up.
Yes, Chairperson, thank you. Yes, we do put such conditions when we approve some deviations with conditions, especially the kind of deviations that come because a tender was cancelled for reasons that are either not allowable by law and therefore are not justifiable, or sometimes you find that a tender validity period has lapsed while the institution is not aware and therefore cannot award that bid, and they would then come for deviation. we identified those elements within the requests that the institutions submit. We also identify elements where there could be fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and we raise that in our responses, and we put conditions for the assessment of such fruitless and wasteful expenditure and consequence management that then needs to be effected when they are identified. But further to that is when the institution's chairperson approach National Treasury for either contract modification or for a deviation in a bid to resolve an irregular expenditure that has been declared by the Auditor General or by National Treasury in itself, and they would come to Treasury to request for a deviation to put a new contract in place but continue with the very same service provider. And those are the things, Chairperson, that take away the opportunity to follow the irregular expenditure framework, and that requires clear action for consequence management, a clear determination test that will assess whether there has been losses to the state, whether there has been value for money to the state for that particular transaction. So those are the important aspects that we have to, Chairperson, look into and address in our responses to the institutions. Thank you.
No, okay, that is fine. I'm quite comfortable with that. I think let us get then a sample, probably let's say of the past, let's say 19, 20 and 2021, of where consequence management was recommended as part and parcel of the approvals. So that we can then make a direct follow-up with the affected departments and or entities. Because what we don't want is cosmetic recommendations, where you make once, let me put it this way, because now the approval has been granted, to hell with everything else. And we'll come again and create another emergency, and to avoid another calamity, the arm of National Treasury will be twisted, and consequence management will be recommended, but that is not the focus of those affected. So I think let's get that breakdown. We know that it may be a tall ask, and say let's give you 14 days to make that submission, and we can have a look at it. And of course, there was a focus on Eskom as well, of course, today in this presentation. If I may have missed it, what are the set of circumstances insofar as the Eskom oil matters? If there's any update or detail on that. Colleagues, right, National Treasury, let me hand over to you.
Chair? Chairman?
Yeah, Babu Sami.
Yeah. What I could probably look into, you'd find out that number of these matters come as a post facto applications, and as one of the Treasury officials has said, that then piles the irregular expenditure for various entities, one way or the other, and the consequence management becomes then the responsibility of the accounting officer of such a department, more so if the denial of National Treasury has been sticky to approve such a deviation. What I would plead for from my side is that it could probably be a much more easier, save the space, save the time, save all intent in as far as a judgment is concerned on these matters, if the approvals could be, well, not approvals, if the applications could be looked into as Treasury applied their mind in terms of whether to approve or not of the applications. So the pace of the decision making becomes very, very critical, so that the share of the entity in terms of consequence management should as well be visible in such aspects, because you'd really look into these things and find out that already the department has spent this money, they have already procured this kind of a service, and the appeal is then for Treasury to procure or to approve as such. I don't know what is the scope. I might be wrong in asking this question, but each and every province, if these are provincial departments, they would have provincial treasuries, which they somewhat deal with in other instances, so that some of the things would come to National Treasury having been worked out for their scope and scale, necessitating the speed up in terms of times of approvals. How could we begin to ensure the facilitation of such decisions are taken timelessly, whether you agree or you disagree, so that you create your own list of those kind of anomalies as per non-approved, you see, deviations, and equally so, you'd feed into the Auditor General's aspect of handling those kinds of audits in terms of a determination of irregular and wasteful expenditure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Absam. I think that is a constructive and progressive intervention. I think it's very helpful. Right. National Treasury, can we hand over to you, and then we can probably wrap it up? I think we have gotten yeah, all right, let's hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may respond on the question on Econ Oil, National Treasury has allowed the processes that Eskom is embarking on to evolve. We will have an intervention with them at an appropriate time. The matter is litigious in nature, therefore we will allow them an opportunity to deal with the matter. However, our review processes will certainly point us in that direction as well. Honorable member indicated that the speed of approval of submissions is key, so that we do not render accounting officials and organs of states into irregularity. Certainly, it's something that we are looking at. However, as Ms. Decker has alluded to earlier, Honorable Chairperson, the inability or the unavailability of information given to National Treasury at the go, so that we don't have to dig for it, is critically important for us to resolve matters on time. I can indicate, Honorable Chair, that on average, we are looking at making sure that a week or two are sufficient for us to deal with matters of a critical nature that are intricate, but certainly within a week for the smaller ones that are just one process direction. But the biggest barrier to us finalizing issues on time is where information does not come as soon as we want it, or in drips and drabs, or where information is not provided for us to make a conclusive decision on the matter that is put to us. Thank you, Chair.
All right, colleagues, I think we will we'll probably need to have an interaction with Eskom, because if my calculations are right, Eskom has got about 24 contract modifications or matters. You know, the Eskom headache, and in light of, you know, the issues that have been raised, for me, I don't know. Khona isisho esithi yabona u-Eskom uyakwazi ukuqeda umoya ngaphandle kokuqeda ugesi, yabona nje ukuqeda umoya. Because we've been having this towing and froing with Eskom for the longest of time as well. And I'm just really, really interested as to why at every point when we're dealing with expansions and deviations, Eskom is at the top of it, though leading the pack. And most often than not, National Treasury is approving these modifications, these expansions and deviations to avoid, you know, calamity. But load shedding, blackouts continue. So the interventions from financial management and flexibility are being made, but the situation is not improving. The contradiction is so glaring.
Mm.
It just, you know, unless my assessment and reading of the situation is wrong, because if National Treasury is saying we are approving things to avoid the obstruction to service delivery, and I put in that basket the provision of electricity as service delivery or access to electricity, approving these things, yet you've got an increase in load shedding and in blackouts. I'm not sure if I'm the one seeing the contradiction or the fault line. So National Treasury, I think that's the final point on my side. I'm just, where are we? Why are we here with Eskom? Or is this something we need to discuss with you and Eskom so that we can find movement on it? But something's wrong with Eskom. All right, Sis Masana, I think that's your hand there. All right, and then I'll be done, colleagues, and then we can call it a day. It's been a long day.
Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. Chair, as I've mentioned before, that when we were talking about the trends and observations, that quite a number of deviations and contract modifications are attributable to poor planning and failure to implement procurement processes. And unfortunately, Chairperson, I don't think Eskom is immune to those challenges as well. Eskom, in our engagement with them and in our process where we work together to look at the issues that they have, we have identified that Eskom has challenges that relate to contract management, where contracts are not managed properly, and as such, the procurement processes are either implemented late or procurement processes are cancelled, and therefore a need for contract extension comes into place to make sure that there's continuity of service while another process is embarked on to establish a new contract. Sometimes we find that the establishment of a new contract in itself comes through a form of a deviation, and we have to take into consideration those kind of issues. It is quite true, Chairperson, that when we look at issues that are related to Eskom, we also have to look at the issues of their ability to deliver on services. But Chairperson, we cannot look away from any other issues that are inexistent within the Eskom environment, such as the continuous use of the same service providers intentionally. So some are due to true and honest reasons, and whenever there are such circumstances, we consider them, and where we find it justifiable, we support Eskom to make sure that they have continuity of services. However, Chairperson, I think going also back to the comment that you made earlier on, I think what is also critical to look into in these departures from normal procurement processes is the root causes of these trends. So the percentage of compliance in implementation of procurement plans, because there is a direct correlation between a number of tender cancellations within an institution and how high or how low is that compared to the number of requests that then comes to National Treasury for approval. And with Eskom, we have seen that they have quite a high number of cancellation of tenders. And unfortunately, then that takes away the opportunity to then appoint suppliers or service providers through a process that is open and transparent and competitive and so forth. So I think that aspect also needs to be looked into, Chairperson. It also makes it difficult for us to consider, and you find that we have too many to's and fro's between ourselves and Eskom in trying to find the correct way to address the procurement challenges that they have, again, at the same time, trying to assist to ensure that they continue to deliver on the services. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, no, I hear you. And I appreciate that very frank and candid response about issues. I think, colleagues, we will park it there, having noted those issues, and we'll reflect on this. I know previously we have made our comments and observations and some recommendations on this matter, but I think we need to look at them in total in light of the new phenomenon of trends and observations. I think maybe the final remark, National Treasury, you have our support for as long as you do the right things and say the right things and implement the laws and regulations and your own notes correctly and properly, so that we can have prudent, stable, effective, and efficient financial management. And I note that, of course, that may not sit well with certain quotas because they believe themselves to be right. But it's not an institutional correctness or individualistic correctness. It's what the law is. And you have been given the duty and the responsibility to be the adjudicator or the referee in these matters. And therefore, we expect you to conduct yourselves in a manner which will be consistent with that responsibility. So, colleagues, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of you for being here. Unless there are any other questions or matters, I think we can flag all these issues for the relevant departments, and what we probably will have to do is zoom in on all the nitty-gritties and the specificities moving forward in terms of how we want to deal with this matter. But I think for today and this evening, let us thank National Treasury and thank you, colleagues. We had a session this morning. There was a question session, and we are here. I think we have had our we've done our work. And of course, I'm reminded that Eskom will be with us on the 23rd of November, which is next week. So we will flag all these issues for then, and we will prepare accordingly. So we will meet next week, colleagues. And please, just a reminder to update Usistombe and Putben about availability for the oversight visit to the South African Post Office following yesterday's meeting. On that very happy note of an oversight visit, the meeting stands adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Hi, Mamtolashe, upumdla.
Hi, umdla, Chair. God, yes, we added you. Thank you so much.